Hello and welcome back to my channel, and today we are going to be continuing our series on Munchausen by proxy. Today we are actually going to be covering Blanca Montano. If you missed last week's video on Kathy Bush, I will have it linked down below for you, and then you should see something pop up here. And let's go ahead and get started. So this case takes place in Arizona. Blanca Montano was 21 years old, a mother of a son and living in Tucson, Arizona. She would give birth to a baby girl in January of 2010. Because of the fact that in this case the victim was a minor, I wasn't able to find the exact name in any court documents, so we'll just go ahead and call her Baby D, since that's how she was noted in the court filings. So Blanca and Baby D's dad, I'm assuming they were no longer together, so it was just Blanca taking care of her daughter and her son. And so about 5 months, February of 2011, I was able to find February 23rd of 2011, Blanca would take Baby D and her older son as well to the hospital. She would take them with concerns of bloody diarrhea as well as a fever. So she took them to U of A Medical Center. Doctors would determine that both kids had contracted E. coli, and Blanca's son, he would make a recovery, so he would get better. However, when it came to Baby D, she would actually get worse instead of getting better. So after 2 days of being admitted into the U of A Medical Center, she was actually transferred over to the pediatrics ICU. So the reason that Baby D got sent to the ICU was because she was having many blood infections that was causing her to actually go into a septic shock. Doctors would conduct tests to try to figure out what was happening with Baby D. Like you'll see in a lot of cases of Munchausen, Baby D seemed to be getting better, and then suddenly she's back to being sick again, and even worse than before. And it always seemed to be something that just could not be explained by anybody. So, like I said, while she was in the ICU, she would have a lot of tests conducted on her to try to figure out what was happening. So while conducting these tests, doctors would find that she would get multiple life-threatening infections. And in the court documents, it would show that these infections were come as like waterborne infections as well as fecal type infections. So like a waterborne infection is something that comes in through like a liquid, so like contaminated water. Fecal would be more if it was like a stool, when you can't, like basically like when you can't push out a stool, like when you need to take laxatives and stuff. So it would be things like that, the different types that they would find. So in Dee's time, because of this, she would contract rotavirus, salmonella, serratia, which can be contracted through like medical equipment, like medical gloves, IVs, things like that. So she would go ahead and actually contract as well a UTI, which is a waterborne type infection, and she would also get staph infections as well, which that is more common as like a skin-borne infection. So this poor little girl is getting staph infections, she's getting E. coli, she's getting salmonella poisoning, she's getting rotavirus, getting all these things wrong with her, and doctors can't figure out what's going on, what's happening to her. So the doctors at this point, they are thinking that this has to be something that pretty much is pre-existing, meaning that it was something that she already had upon entering the hospital. They couldn't find anything to back that. I want to touch a little bit on the type of procedure, one particular type of procedure that Baby D had to endure. And it stood out to me the most because as a parent, I wouldn't want to put my child through anything like this. But Blanca Montano put her 5-month daughter through a bone marrow biopsy. Now, a bone marrow biopsy, if you're not familiar, Johns Hopkins Medicine describes a bone marrow biopsy as removing a small sample of bone marrow inside of your bones for testing. Bone marrow is the soft tissue in the center of most large bones. It takes most of the body's blood cells. The biopsy is done by using a small needle inserted into the bone, and most of the time you are conscious for this procedure, which means that they only numb that certain area, and if you move even like an inch, it's done. And to do this to a 5-month-old child, it's upsetting. But the biopsy would be done, and it would be to in fact determine what was going on with her. But I'm thinking, why would a mother put her child through this? I can't understand why. But moving on. So the doctors are trying to figure out what's causing baby D to get all of these infections. They can't figure it out. So they get to the conclusion that someone must be doing something. And it's either going to be the staff, it's going to be family, but it's not anything that she has contracted from medical equipment. It's not something that she had in her system prior to coming to the hospital. Nothing like that. So what the hospital staff decides to do is they decide to actually go ahead and install a camera into baby D's room to go ahead and figure out what's happening. So what I like about this is because back in Kathy Bush's case, they didn't do anything like this, probably because it was like the 90s. And in this case, it's 2011. Technology is a lot more advanced. And so you can kind of see the differences in the two, where in this case, they were able to actually get video instead of in Kathy Bush's case, where it was like they pretty much had just them saying it, and of course medical proof. But nonetheless, they install the camera into baby D's room, and not even a week, it was like 3 days after the camera was installed, video surveillance would capture Blanca trying her absolute hardest to cover up that camera. She would take it was reported like one of those alcohol wipes that they give you like right before they're going to give you your shot. She would take one of those and try to cover the lens so that you couldn't see anything. And then that same day, which I don't know if she thought that she had covered it well enough or that she had just given up on that plan and just was like, I can't get caught, I don't know. But nonetheless, though, the camera that same day would capture Blanca coming out of the bathroom with one hand in her sweatshirt, and she would walk over to baby D's crib and grab the IV. I'm not sure if she actually was successful in injecting. I'm gonna assume that she didn't know this, but whenever the IV was messed with, it set off an alarm, I'm assuming at the nurse's station, to let them know that something was happening with the IV. Well, that happened, and pretty much the very next day, the hospital would hold a meeting where they basically gave Blanca the opportunity to justify her actions and justify why she was trying to cover up that camera. Blanca would tell hospital staff that she tried to cover the camera for her daughter's privacy. So in this meeting, and it was like a meeting that the technical term for this meeting was a patient conference, and it was just like basically a meeting with like medical staff and Blanca. Well, in this meeting, she would tell them that she covered up the camera, that it was for her daughter's privacy, and then they would notify her that they were going to get in contact with CPS and make a claim. Well, when Blanca was told this, her response to them was, I'm surprised you haven't called CPS before now. Blanca ended up being prohibited from entering her daughter's room, and after this, baby D was able to make a full recovery, and she was actually discharged in April. So she spent 2 months in the hospital and majority of that was within the ICU department, which was preventable. I will be getting into the reason as to why Blanca was making her daughter sick soon. So when the hospital went ahead and made the CPS report, Baby D was pretty much taken into the custody of CPS while she was still in the hospital. That was on March 23rd. She didn't get actually discharged until April. But Blanca would be arrested on April 5th of 2011. She would be charged with attempted first-degree murder of a minor and child abuse with death or serious injury likely. The attempted murder charge that would end up being dropped, so she ultimately would just be tried for the child abuse charge, but Blanca would plead not guilty and her bail would be set at $50,000. So her trial took place about 2 years after the incident in 2013, and Blanca's attorneys would basically argue that she was innocent because there wasn't enough evidence and that the hospital workers were the ones responsible for making Baby D sick. And so prosecutors would go ahead and actually show the video of Blanca attempting to sort of mess with Baby D's IV. And after a couple of months, Blanca Montano would be found guilty of child abuse with death or serious injury likely, and she would be sentenced to 13 years in prison. Now, you may be wondering why Blanca was doing all of these things to her daughter. And it's nice because as opposed to Kathy's case where we didn't really have like a why to it, in Blanca's case, we do. Blanca did all of this to her daughter to try to get attention from her baby daddy. Blanca put her child through torture to try to get attention from her daughter's dad, because apparently getting attention from your baby daddy is better than your actual child. It was a short case. It was pretty much an open and closed case, so there wasn't a whole lot that we could dive into. But definitely, though, I will be going ahead and getting the next one out, which is going to be Lacey Spears. So definitely be on the lookout for that. But if you like the video, go ahead and leave me a like. Leave me a comment down below. Thank you for watching and have a wonderful day. And don't forget to subscribe. Bye. Mama, I'm a criminal.